So first of all, hello, Gaitlyn. So,
Hello.
so today we are here with Gaitlyn, who is a member of the University of Miami Shark Research and Conservation Program. And
Okay, so sorry.
oh no, all good. So we're going to be talking about us, as you can see, about shark research and conservation. So whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So just a little bit about me. Like you said, I work with the University of Miami Shark Research and Conservation Program. So I'm a master's student there, where my research is really looking into how the city of Miami impacts fish and shark behavior together, more specifically with their feeding interactions. So basically, I'm using cameras to set them all throughout the water and kind of see. But today, I'll kind of be talking to you about a more general scale of sharks in the Miami area and what SRC is trying to do to learn more about them. So to begin, what is a shark? So sharks are fish. However, they're different from what we think of as a typical fish in a few key ways. So sharks have a very long evolutionary history. So they've been around for about 450 million years, which means they've been swimming in our oceans about 200 million years longer than the dinosaurs. So they've had a lot of time to become the top predators that they are. So the picture on the top right shows an ancient shark. And as you can see, it has that general body form that looks the same as the sharks we have today. However, it has a few key differences. So they've definitely changed over time to best suit their environments. So another way that sharks are different than fish we typically think of is that they're cartilaginous. And what this means is that their skeleton is completely made of cartilage. So this is the same material that we have in our ears and at the tip of our noses. So it's very lightweight and flexible, which is really beneficial for them when they're swimming. It helps to keep them afloat in some ways. It also makes them highly maneuverable. So, a lot of sharks are very quick. They can turn very quickly. This cartilaginous skeleton really helps them. Another way they differ is they're lacking a swim bladder. So what a swim bladder is in a bony fish is this gas-filled chamber that really helps keep them afloat. So like I said, with that cartilaginous skeleton, that helps, but sharks also have a very large oily liver. It actually takes up most of the length of their body for most species, and this helps them stay buoyant or afloat in the water. And finally, they are also cold-blooded, many of them. Some do have different systems that kind of help them keep heated in their body temperature. However, most sharks rely on the environment to get their body temperature. So this means they're really restricted in where they can go and where they can live and how long they can be in certain places. So just like humans, sharks have the same five senses. However, they use them sometimes differently than we do, and it really helps them become the predators that they are. So first, sharks have really good eyesight, especially in low light conditions like at night. So if you've ever taken a picture of your dog or cat, sometimes if you have the flash on, their eyes are glowing and it reflects back at you. Sharks have kind of the same thing. So they have this layer in the back of their eye called the tapetum lucidum. And basically, that layer captures even the smallest amount of light in the environment and reflects it back out so that in low light conditions, they're really able to take in as much information from the environment as they can, which is really beneficial if you're a predator hunting at night. They also have a sense of hearing. However, it's very different than our sense of hearing. So they do have ear-like structures, but they're not as noticeable as ours. Instead, basically, they have pores all over their body that are used to detect any movement of water particles. So if a fish is thrashing, one water particle is going to hit another, and the sharks are actually able to detect that. And depending on the structure of those pores they have all over their body, they're actually able to tell where that disturbance, or if a fish was thrashing, what direction that's coming from, so that they can head in that direction. So definitely their sense of hearing is different than ours, but it helps them really sense what's going on in their environment. They also have a really great sense of smell. I'm sure many of you have heard that sharks can sense a drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I know that's often said. That's generally true. However, in any case, a shark needs that drop of blood to actually hit its nostrils or nares in order to sense it. So if you're on one end of an Olympic swimming pool, you couldn't drop a little bit of blood in the water and a shark would just know. They would actually have to detect that little bit of blood. But what's really cool is they're able to detect very small amounts of it, which really helps when you're trying to find an injured fish that you could potentially eat. And another really cool fact about their sense of smell is they do it kind of similar to the way that we hear. So if someone calls our name to our right side, we can tell where that sound came from and we can turn in that direction. With sharks, they can actually tell which nostril detected that smell first. So if it's coming from the right side, they know to swim in that direction to find the prey that they're looking for, which I think is really cool. So they also have a sense of taste. They have a tongue that's kind of fused to the bottom of their mouth. And I always like to say that, this sense of taste helps them determine, what foods they like and what foods they don't. So a common question that we'll always get is, why, if there is the unfortunate circumstance of a shark biting a person or something like that, why is it only one bite? But this is really because when they taste us, they know that they don't like the taste and this isn't what they were looking for. So, that's really important for them as well. And then finally, they do have a sense of touch. However, their sense of touch is not as strong as ours. So another common question we get when we're out on the field on the boat is, do sharks feel pain in any of the research techniques that we're doing? And basically, we as humans are much more sensitive to pain than sharks are. So while we can't say that, no, they don't feel pain at all, we know it's significantly less than we do. And it's a much different response in the fact that they are just like, okay, this isn't a situation I want to be in. I got to get out for my own benefit. Whereas, if we touch a hot stove, we have an emotional response with that. That's not the same for sharks, but they do use that sense of touch to generally, figure out what's going on in their environment. And what is a really cool thing is they actually have some extra senses. So one of my favorites that's being outlined in the picture on the left is their lateral line. So all fish have this, and this is actually part of the way they hear and sense their environment as well. So that lateral line is basically runs their entire length of their body, and they can detect that particle movement I was talking about. So if there's a disturbance, they could tell where it's coming from. So not only is that beneficial when they're trying to find prey, but also some sharks swim in a school or a group. So when they're all swimming in a certain direction, they can kind of sense what the other sharks are doing around them, which helps them swim in that school. And then finally, my favorite sense that they have is the ampullae of Lorenzini, which is that picture on the bottom right. So basically, these are tiny gel-filled pores that are mostly on the snout of the shark. And basically what they do is they detect any electrical impulse in the water or a little electrical signal. So every time any living thing moves their muscle, they produce a slight electrical signal. So a shark is able to detect that. And, this is really cool for species like hammerhead who, are going along the bottom. They can detect any prey under the sand that's just breathing because it's moving those muscles. So this is, a really cool thing that makes them a great predator. So there are more than 500 species of shark in total. And as you can see, this slide just represents a few of the different kinds, and they're all different shapes, sizes, colors. They live in different environments. So there's a lot of diversity. And something that's really crazy is we're still discovering new sharks all the time. So, we have over 500 species now, but it can continue to increase, especially as we discover these, deep sea habitats and things like that we haven't really been able to explore. So why do we want to study sharks? What's the importance there? Basically, in most environments, sharks are the top predator, and in that way, they kind of control the rest of their environment by this top-down effect. So they play a really key role in weeding out any sick or dying fish. And that's really important because that helps the process of evolution in a way. So, they provide this natural selection pressure. And basically what that means is when a fish is, really great for its environment. It's the smartest, it's the fittest, it's the strongest. Those are more likely to live a longer life and reproduce. And this helps, evolution move forward because the most favorable traits are being, passed on through generations. So by sharks removing those sick, weak, or dying fish, it helps this process move along. So they're really important in their environment. However, there's a lot of issues facing sharks that can remove them from that role, which is really sad. So there's a few things that sharks are facing that we try to study in order to help them to the best of our ability. And the first is bycatch. So basically what that means is this occurs when people are fishing for a specific species of fish. However, they accidentally catch another species. So this can happen in cases like, long lines where they just put hooks in the water and they accidentally catch a shark even though they're looking for tuna. So unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, either the shark is kept because shark meat is, worth a lot of money, or sharks will unfortunately die due to those fishing gears. So that unfortunately takes a lot of sharks out of their environment. There are some shark fisheries that exist specifically fishing for sharks. One of the most common cases why sharks are fished is for shark finning. So there is a type of soup called shark fin soup that requires a shark fin in it. It doesn't add any flavor or taste, but it's a delicacy and it's a really expensive item. It's a sign of status. So it's an important market. So a lot of sharks are unfortunately fished for that specific purpose. And a lot of times when they are fished, their fins will be removed at sea and the rest of the shark is put back into the water. So unfortunately they can't swim and they will die. So that is a serious issue sharks are facing. And finally, there's also climate change, which, we're all affected by. But in the case of the sharks, their habitats might be changing. If their temperatures are warming, they might not be able to be in the places that they used to be. So this is going to have a lot of impacts. So due to the research that, many other labs have done as well as ours, we've seen that a lot of shark populations have declined around 90% from where they used to be commonly found. So where there used to be a lot of them. And recently, 24% of all shark species were listed as either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. So if no steps are taken to, protect these species, they could potentially go extinct. And this is actually really concerning because we still don't know a lot about many shark species. So the International Union for Conservation of Nature, who looks into this, determined that about 47% of shark species, we still don't know much about them to determine whether they're vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. So we still need to do a lot of research to figure this out. So, basically what could happen if sharks are removed from the system? So for this, I'll use the example of a coral reef. So coral reefs are very important habitats. They hold a lot of life. And sharks are a part of them. So in this example, we'll just use the shark that eats the grouper. The grouper will eat the parrotfish, and the parrotfish grazes on algae that could potentially take over a coral reef if it's left unchecked. And if that happens, a coral reef will unfortunately die. So in this case, a shark is a really important regulating factor in keeping that coral reef healthy. So say this is a natural situation where there are, a number of sharks keeping the rest of the population in check. Unfortunately, shark numbers decline. This will lead to an increase in the amount of grouper. Increased grouper will mean that they're eating more parrotfish, so there's less parrotfish in the ocean. And then with less parrotfish, they're not able to graze as much on that algae, so algae might overgrow those coral reefs. So this is just, a very basic example of what could happen if we're not researching how best to protect sharks. So what does shark research and conservation do? So we kind of try to intersect research, activism, and outreach all together. So we're always, out in the field taking our samples to try to determine what's going on with sharks in our area. Then we take that information that we find and we bring it to the government to try to make new rules on how to best protect sharks. Or, we bring it to the media so that more people can learn about it. And then we also do outreach. So we talk to school groups just like yourselves, Or we bring students out on the boat to see the research that we do so they can learn about sharks and learn about how best to protect them. So this is an example of just some of the research that we do. So like I said earlier, a lot of our research focuses on how the city of Miami impacts the sharks in the area. So we'll do things like tagging and tracking. So we'll tag sharks in the Miami area and see how far away they go. If they stay in the same area, we try to determine with that information, what are the critical areas that they're using, whether for feeding or giving birth or mating, so we can best protect those areas. We'll also take samples that we can look at their diet, because if we find that a shark species is eating a specific type of fish, well, we might need to work towards creating protections for that fish to make sure the resources are available for that species. We'll look at things like morphology. So morphology means that we take measurements of the width of the shark. So all those lines along the shark's body are measurements that we'll take, and that gives us an indication of whether a shark is healthy or not. Because in the animal kingdom, if you're a little bit bigger, you're healthier because you have a lot of energy. If you're smaller, you might be a little unhealthier. So we can look at that and say, okay, sharks in the Miami area are either healthy or not healthy, and how to move forward with that information. So these are just some examples of the work we'll do in order to learn more about the sharks in our area. And one way I always like to kind of bring everything together at the end of this presentation is, the ways that everyone can help to protect sharks. So the first thing is just to, increase your education, which you're already doing. That's awesome. And then spread the word. So you could talk to your family and friends about the information you learned today and why sharks are important in their environments. You can also eat sustainable seafoods. So that's a really important thing to make sure that the food that you eat is coming from a good source that's not involved with bycatch or things like that. You could try to the best of your ability to avoid single-use plastics. Unfortunately, a lot of those end up in the ocean, impacting sharks as well as other species and other habitats. And just, try to participate as much as you can in any shark conservation activities. So attending talks or going on field trips or supporting aquariums. Those are really great ways to, help sharks and protect them.
My apologies.
Oh,
I couldn't hear.
Sorry, my watch. But that's all. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. So I would say personally, that was so interesting to me because sharks have always been like my favorite thing. Growing up, I just had an absolute shark phase, and I've loved them, as I'm sure you can relate to.
Yes, definitely.
So based on my shark love, and I know Katie likes them too, and we actually talked with the elementary schools. We have a couple questions for you from both the elementary schools and Katie and I ourselves. So my first one is, and I'm actually intrigued to know this, you said that there are like over 500 species of sharks and more to be discovered. So out of all of those, what has been your favorite to like work with? And is there a specific reason why? Is there a story behind it?
So that's a great question. My favorite species to work with, I wish I could work with all 500. That would be amazing. But my favorite species to work with is definitely the tiger shark. So they do frequent Miami a lot. So we see them, relatively often. They're just such a beautiful species, whether they are juvenile or they're adults. They have these beautiful colors and patterns. So they just always look so beautiful when in the water. But I think my favorite part about them is, I think the general perception of sharks is, the bigger the shark, the tougher they are, the meaner they are. And that's really not the case with the tiger shark. It's really funny because I think when I first started shark research, when we would be, if we were lucky enough to see a tiger shark, we would be bringing it closer to the boat to collect those samples. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a massive animal. How are we going to get it here? It's definitely going to put up a fight. But that's really not the case. Once we get them close to the boat, they kind of just plop on our platform and sit there, and they don't thrash or anything you would normally associate with this big shark. And it's so funny because, sometimes we'll work with nurse sharks, which tend to be smaller than the tigers. And they're the ones that, are kind of difficult. They're thrashing on the platform and, they're wiggling and all this stuff. So it's just so funny to me because it's very counterintuitive to what I would expect from this big, beautiful animal.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so our next question is like, what made you choose to work with the University of Miami's shark research team? Like, what drew you to it, and what, you know, like, why did you go and work there?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I have always been interested in animal behavior and how human activity impacts that behavior. So, kind of like I was mentioning before, a lot of our research reflects on the impact that the city of Miami has on the surrounding waters. So, I think that was really why I was drawn to this lab. And I think this is especially important because, with time, human populations are only increasing, and a lot of people are moving closer to those coastal communities and coastal cities. So, as we go forward, there's only going to be more of an impact. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to go back and look at quote unquote natural conditions to see what they were. But I think it's really important to document it now and understand what's going on now so that we can move forward in a hopefully positive way for the future. So we know how to best protect these habitats and species, because I'm sure in the future there's only going to be more people, more influence, unfortunately, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I think it's really important to look into that now. And because the shark research team at the University of Miami is doing that, I felt that it was a great place for me to do my research.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting actually. But I know that you mentioned earlier when you were first working with the tiger sharks, you were almost kind of afraid because it's this massive animal and you're like, how are we going to do this? So way back in the beginning when you first started this, how did you kind of learn to work with sharks? Were there like certain fears? Were you afraid of getting bitten? Did you get bit? Just kind of like what it looked like for you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think you would find with any shark lab that you work with is as soon as you join, there is a lot of training. So once I joined the shark research team, we had to sit through multiple trainings where we learned the specific research techniques that have been developed over time with the safety of ourselves and the shark in mind, because that's the two most important things. So, one of the things we always like to say is, we have specific samples we want to take, but if any of those samples ever compromise our safety or the shark's safety, our safety is the most important. So through these techniques, we've learned ways to best do this. And then as far as your question about being afraid or, have I ever gotten bitten? Thankfully, no. I don't know anyone on our team that has, so that's a very good thing. But I wouldn't say that I was necessarily ever afraid of getting bitten. I think whenever you work with animals, you have to be aware of, their behaviors and what could potentially happen. I don't think it's necessarily something to be afraid of. It's just you have to realize that they are animals. It's the same thing as if you're working with a dog or a cat. There is the potential for that animal to bite you. So you might handle it in certain ways or work with it in certain ways to avoid that risk. So the same thing with sharks. We've developed these techniques on, how to best take the samples, how to best secure them, so that we can avoid those situations that have luckily never come up. But you just always have to be aware in any situation when you're working with an animal.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it's kind of like a really random fun question, but what were your favorite classes in high school?
Sure. So I have known that I wanted to do marine biology since I was very little. So I always loved the sciences and math, especially my biology courses. So, just general biology. I took marine science. So those were my favorite classes in high school. And just to kind of tie this back to, anyone who might want to be a marine scientist or in any science in the future, those courses are super important to, pay attention to and do well in, because that's something you're going to use pretty much every day going forward in this career. But also, another class I really enjoyed that I've found a lot of use out of now in my career is my English courses, which sounds kind of funny because I'm in the sciences, but the best way to talk about my findings or anyone's findings is to write about them so that the general public can learn about them as well. So you really have to strengthen your writing skills in order to do well in the sciences also. So I would say, those were my favorite classes, but if anyone is looking to go into a scientific field, those are the skills you really want to develop.
Well, as an English lover myself, I certainly did that. But that's all that we have. So thank you so much for doing this. I know it was very interesting to me, and I'm sure our elementary school students are going to absolutely love it, especially getting to see those pictures of the sharks and you with the sharks at the beginning. Like, that is just so cool to me. So thank you so much for coming out and doing this. We greatly appreciate it, and I know the students will too.
Great. I'm so glad I was able to do this. Thank you for inviting me.